Welcome to the Car Sim and Race Driver Show, presented by Hugh Hattrick. Here at Bathurst in the Forest, my very special guest, Beta Golly, Rascal, Rabbit, Josh Martin. It's great to have you back on the show. Drive fast and try not to crash. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Car Sim and Race Driver Show. And today we have another incredible special guest. It is James Bacon. Hello, James. How are you doing today?
Hi, Hugh. I'm great. How are you?
I'm extremely well. I'm very excited to have what I did say was actually a pro sim racer. And I'm sure you are. You're just saying it. But straight from an incredible performance, first in class and 6th overall at the Spa 24-hour race that just literally 2 weeks ago, which was organised by the SimGrid. I mean, what a performance to be able to finish all of that. And you were going strong for nearly 21 hours because if you weren't driving, you were engineering. So tell me, what was it like and what was the experience overall of doing such a race?
Oh, it was amazing, Hugh. I can't really put it down to any other simpler terms than that. It was just anything what I had got into sim racing to do was to do endurance racing, and this is our first 24-hour race, and we're very inexperienced. We're just a team of mates, really, and it was just, let's go as hard as we can, have a bit of fun, and it was just phenomenal. And the quality of the event and the quality of the competitors, really, it kind of hasn't really sunk in, really, what we've done, because a lot of the guys there are really experienced, and it almost felt like, it's a little bit unbelievable,
So how did it all start? How did you get into sim racing, and what was the kind of motivation behind it all?
Well, I mean, sim racing for me is kind of a story of two halves. So sim racing, if you want to call simulation, I've only been sim racing since 4 days before UK lockdown this year, when I bought my first wheel, pretty much. Yeah, so I've only been sim racing since March, but I have been competitive racing in the past, but on gamepad on Forza 4. But this was 6 years ago, I think, was when I stopped doing that, and I was doing it for about 2-3 years. But it's the same nature. It might be an arcade game, but it's just as competitive as sim racing. So I took a break for about 6 years, and I thought, I foresaw lockdown coming, and I knew there would be no racing. I thought, I want to do sim racing, and that's that. I bought a wheel, and I bought a set of course, and I bought a wheel stand, and that's really where it took off from, just the start of this year.
Wow, and that's quite a thing. We've already had a first question for you from Amanda Rice, and she says here, out of all the cars you've driven as a pro driver, which is your favourite? Why, and on what track does it handle best?
Probably Porsche. I love Porsche so much. It's a proper driver's car. That's why I love it. It drives so nice. You drive it on the throttle. You don't need to drive it with the brakes or the steering wheel. You just lift off in car turns. Probably the best track for the Porsche is not what I would call my favourite track, but Laguna Seca. It just gels really well at Laguna. It's the nature of the track. It's stop start, 90-degree corners. The Porsche just takes off through that track.
Yeah. So is it mainly Group 3 in the Porsches that you like, or do you like other?
Oh, GT? You mean GT3? Yeah.
Yeah, GT3.
Yeah. I in real life, I mean, if we're talking about cars that I love in real life, Porsche and Aston Martin is up there. But in sim racing, it's Porsche. They're the best things to drive. GT3, GT4, GT Cup, Cup cars. And I mean, if you drive a different sim, whether it be like R Factor, or I don't think there is a mod in R Factor for 919, but if you can find a Porsche 919 LMP1 to drive, if it's a Porsche, it's a Porsche, and it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. So you said that you just got your first wheel earlier on this year, and then did you have a sim rig as well, or was it literally just a kind of, was it? You said that it was on a stand, or
yes.
Did you have it in the floor?
Yeah, so it's the first wheel I bought for myself, but I originally had the Xbox wireless wheel back in the day, but that was, the arcade on F1 2010. But the first wheel I bought for myself getting in sim racing, I bought a GT Omega, just a wheel stand, because I don't have a lot of space really for a sim cockpit. Where I'm sitting now is where I sim race. I'm a DJ and a music producer, so I kind of have to swap the music production gear out of the way and bring the wheel stand and the wheel in. It's a little bit cowboy, but you know. But I mean, I think I bought that wheel stand and the wheel on the same day, and they both sold out within, I think, 2 or 3 days after I bought it. So I was really, really quite lucky. Otherwise, I could have went months and not actually got into sim racing at all.
And at what point did you realize that you were, very, very good at sim racing, and you kind of had a passion for it? Because you obviously have to be good to do as well as you can.
Of course, no, yeah. I mean, I don't like to think I'm good. I mean, there's always people who are better, and there's always people that you need to aim to be better, but or aim to compete with, I suppose. But I mean, for my own performance, I would just say since we won Suzuka, we joined the SimGrid World Cup for the four endurance rounds, which is basically the Intercontinental GT Challenge, just minus the Gunaseka. And we did Suzuka, and we did not expect to win. I mean, we just went into that race and just drove at our own pace, and then come the end of the race, we'd won, and I was like, wow, actually, maybe we are actually quite good. It was a shock because we just, as I said earlier, we're just 3 mates having a laugh. We don't imagine doing esports. We don't imagine doing big competitive racing, and it just seemed to go well. And I would say, it was around Suzuka we sort of realized, maybe we're capable of competing. We're not capable of competing with the absolute best, but in our group of drivers, I would say, we're quite competent, and we're quite proud of what we've achieved.
Yeah. So I know you said you'd played Forza earlier on, about 6 years ago or more. In the early days, and obviously you were very good at that on the pad, and it's a good game. It's a good arcade game, as you say. And I know there were big championships and all sorts of stuff for that. Did you ever, when you were kind of younger as well, did you ever try PlayStation and other kind of games, or was it mainly Forza?
I mean, competitive racing, the only ones I ever was into, because I had an Xbox 360, was the F1 series and Forza. I've played. I mean, it was actually a few months ago. I thought I'll work out how many car or racing games I've owned, and I got something like 30 or 40, and I just stopped because I couldn't even remember anymore. But I've been gaming since I was like, as long as I can remember. So and every game I've had has been a car game of some form, good or bad.
That's pretty good, because that's what you find that a lot of sim racing people are like. They've either grown up with Gran Turismo, or things like that, or perhaps racing games. I remember I used to have a game called Saloon Cars for my old Acorn 8000, which was a great fun game, actually. It used to bug out all the time, though, if you did a lap and things would happen. And it was hilarious because if you hit the wall, if you had a big crash and you hit the wall, there was a sound of a thud, and then it would just say game over, on your day. that was it. So I was very good. I had a Vauxhall Astra GTE, right, kind of like saloon touring car thing, and I was very good at qualifying on pole, but it was so badly set up that it would go for about 2 laps and then it would expire. And you could choose your list of mechanics, from the kind of the basics to the best. And if you could only afford the basic one, it was Bill Bustit Mechanics who would be doing your tires, and they had a great one for choosing the tires. The cheapest one, it was called Fatal Slip. On this one, so it was, that's what we kind of grew up with, and then the cars got better. And I think it's been amazing how the games have improved over the years. I don't know if you ever played Toka Touring Cars. That was the late 90s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. I never played it. I know of it. I never played Toka Touring Cars, but I mean, the first sort of serious racers I played, serious real life cars, would have been the Gran Turismo games from around 2000 and maybe 2000, 2002. They did that concept one. The first one I can remember. They did that Gran Turismo concept Tokyo something or other, Tokyo Geneva or something it was called. I can't remember. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. That's the first one I can remember. playing, and yeah. So, but I know took a turn cars, and I've heard some fond memories of it. But
it was hilarious.
Incredible. Yeah.
It was one of the best games. They did Toka Touring Cars 2 for PlayStation, I think it was. And I remember you could do Formula Fords. And I remember racing around Silverstone in Formula Ford. And they could have spectacular crashes. If you touch somebody's wheel, you would literally cartwheel over. And it was really good for the experience of the time. And I remember I touched somebody and they went flying off at Copse Corner. And it must have been obviously these bugs or things that they had written into the game. So when I did the next lap and I came round, the actual racing driver, even though I'm sure it was AI, was actually standing beside his car waving his fist at me. Yeah, it was absolutely. I couldn't believe it. It was fantastic. It was hilarious. But no, I mean they've all grown up and gotten better. And I think probably like yourself, you would have played these early Gran Turismo games and well into the night as you try and achieve all the goals and the objectives of the game. And now they are competing in these incredible races. So how do you find, one of the questions we've had here is, what's your number one sim racing tip to improve your lap time and your overall kind of sim racing ability?
For me personally, it comes from just practice and lots of it, because I'm into endurance racing. Sprint racing is not really my thing, and times hot lapping isn't my thing either. What's important to me is to do a good job over a long period, and that means being consistent. And for me, the only way I can find to be consistent is to do a lot of practice, really. To do a lot of practice, learn the track, and then for me personally, is to stay focused. I'm sure you know Jardier. I'm sure you've watched Jardier, and he has this habit of being able to talk while driving for hours and hours and hours, and just do these consistent laps. And I'm getting a little bit better at that, but I'm still at the point where I'm bending it into the wall from every now and again. Just been trying to talk and drive. So yeah, my main tip would be just if you're struggling with consistency, would just be to practice. It's really about practicing and focusing on. One thing I've learned about my other pastime in music production, when you're starting out in music production, is things that you learn are happy accidents. And I said this to one of my teammates the other day, is sometimes you can drive around and repeat the mistake after mistake after mistake, and you won't realize you're doing a mistake until you have the happy accident and not do the mistake, and you do hit that corner right, or you do use the maximum width of the road, or whatever it may be. And the only way you can ever find out that to reach that limit, or to have that happy accident, should I say, or happy mistake that means you go quicker, is to just practice and eventually find all the places where you can eke out those little bits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the thing. So you told us that you'd won in Suzuka, which is an amazing achievement. But in the 6 months or so, or 8 months since lockdown, since you really started, what would you say have been your main highlights as well, other than Suzuka, with the races that you've been taking part in?
I think we've done basically, they're all my favorites are all endurance races. So Spa, obviously winning Spa was just incredible, just the work and the dedication. But I think the most fun I've had racing in this time was I started sim racing in March, and I met my teammates Zlatan and Ryan. I met them in April, and we did our first endurance together in May. And that first endurance we did together was 6 hours on Silverstone, and it was like 50 cars, and we started in like nearly P40, and we were on for a P10 before we got a penalty, which sadly dropped us down for speeding in the pits. But it was the first endurance race. It was the one thing I wanted to do when I got into sim racing, was endurance racing, and I did it with two mates, and we just had a ball of a time, and it was just so much fun.
And you think as well, you're not even technically with them. They're obviously doing it remotely. I think once the COVID has lifted, it's going to be even more fun, because you'll be able to do it more together, perhaps. And these events, they might put them in a shed somewhere or a studio somewhere, and you'll be able to race all live together. And I think that will be even more exciting, because it'll bring it all together. I mean, they were starting to do that before COVID, and it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. What would be your kind of idea of the ideal kind of sim race in the future once COVID lifts, as a kind of event? Would you like to be able to do it all together in a live studio, or are you quite happy just to do it remotely?
I actually think that's a very good idea, to be honest with you. I mean, we saw that with the Le Mans Virtual. I don't know if you watched the Le Mans Virtual this year, and they had 50 cars, and I think the cars were split between 2 real life drivers and 2 sim drivers, and they had 2 teams competing in the studio in, I think it was Paris where they had it, and that was a good aspect to have. And to be honest, I think I would like that as an event. If obviously something like that, say for example, you had a big endurance race like the SimGrid Spa 24 Hours, having 48 cars and bringing, let's say, 3 to 4 drivers per car and trying to get them into one location is a big event, and it would take a lot of money. But and obviously to supply the hardware and to have everyone on equal hardware, because obviously if you have people who drive on direct drive Fanatec, superstar spaceship machine at home, and then turn up and you say, here, just use this, just use this Logitech. I'm sure they wouldn't be too happy, but but that would be an incredible. I think that would be, if you could have the most ideal sim racing event, it would be that. I think one benefit of the lockdown is sim racing has had more eyes than it would do otherwise, because of people are looking for racing to watch. And I think having that physicality aspect of people actually being able to see the drivers, doing, I don't know, driver swaps or something, or being in person, they can see them on an HD TV camera, could maybe bring that more natural aspect to the front. Because sometimes when you're watching the sim race, it looks as real as get out until you see a car lagging, or you never see any. So something like that would be incredible. I think if you had an event like that, it would just make it.
One day, I know that last year, I know Josh Martin and Chris Hay and a few others had been. I think it was to Monza, and I think it was for the Blancpain, or the as it was called before, the Blancpain Championship, and they were actually at the end of the Monza pit lane, and you could see the real cars heading past them in the background, and then they had their sim race in the pit building, or at the end of the pit building, alongside it, and it was fantastic, because I think it gives that atmosphere. And then you see everybody, as you say, they're all racing. I think it was more of a sprint race. Well, it was a few hours. It wasn't as long. But I think it's very exciting seeing lots of people in one room, all with decent machinery, decent sim rigs, and racing away. And I think it could do a lot to reinvigorate motorsport across the UK and Europe, which has taken a bit of obviously a battle in the last wee while. But I think sim racing is a wonderful way in for people to have a shot. And if they like it, they can do. If they practice enough, they can end up doing rather well. Do you think? The question would be: is where do you see sim racing going now that you've had this kind of success? And have you been invited to many more races to take part in?
We haven't actually been invited to any, because we're not high profile enough. But we do have the SimGrid, the final round of the championship, which we are leading, thankfully, at Kyalami, and that's in 2 weeks' time. And we're probably going to do a few more endurances after that. But I just wanted to come back to what you said there about people making the cross from sim to real life. And we see in the British GT, you have Baldwin has come over as the world's fastest gamer, and that's quite a high profile one. But you have the sims now, like ACC. You have like real life GT3 drivers like Mickey Team driving a sim. It's the closest thing you can currently buy to driving the real cars, and it's phenomenal, really, the quality and particularly the detail of Assetto Corsa, to be able to, obviously you don't have the feel of the car, you can't feel the car through your bum, but other than that, every other aspect of it is so detailed. It's as close to real life as probably we can physically get right now with the technology we have.
Yeah, it is amazing how realistic it does feel. And I think especially if you've got a really good sim rig setup as well, it looks even more spectacular. And I think you get a bit more feel when you're in a good kind of cockpit style sim rig. But we've got another question from Amanda Rice, and it is: who would form your pro sim racing dream team?
So if that's sim racers or real life
sim racing dream team.
So just pick, I don't know, like 3 endurance drivers, 3 sim drivers. You'd have to have Jardier because he's hilarious. Who else would I pick? I'm not really quite sure. the most of the people that I know are people who play Assetto Corsa Competizione, so I'm sure there are absolutely massive sim racers out there who play other sims. But for me, obviously, Jardier would be in there. I think I would have to probably pick that Nils Neujoks, because he's just insane. The guy's pace is like, the guy is just next level how quick he is. And I've actually raced against him, and it's just insane how fast he is. You just can't comprehend. And I mean, if I wasn't in there, I don't know who I would pick for the third one. I really can't tell you who I would pick for the third person. If I wasn't there just for the fun, you know, if it was for three people who were just absolutely dominating, Jardier, Nils Neujoks, and probably for the people I know, it would probably be Jordan Sherritt, who's currently in our SimGrid World Cup Championship. Is of the drivers currently in the championship, of one driver who stands out, it's Jordan Sherritt. He's as quick as Nils Neujoks, I think. So if you were going for an Assetto Corsa dream team, it would be those three.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And what would you, I mean, if you could get the chance to drive in real racing, what would be your kind of optimum style or optimum series that you would like to drive in?
My dream would be to go to Le Mans. It's always been Le Mans for me. It's like, I've always been a touring car fan up until a few years ago. I've always loved Le Mans. I think everyone who likes racing loves Le Mans. And then as the last few years, I've gone super into endurance racing. So if I could do a every man, every day series, it would probably be in a GTE car at the LMS series, you know, the European Le Mans series, or maybe, you know, GT3 and the Michelin Le Mans Cup, something ACO to me personally, if I could drive one of those.
And one of the big questions when you're doing these endurance races and you have to drive at night, I mean, I know obviously you're in a room and you're racing away. How do you, I mean, it's a very different aspect to drive at night and keep your concentration. What's kind of the key thing for that, to be able to drive at night and not to kind of get distracted? Because when I was watching, I stayed up to watch some of the 24-hour race during the night, and it's so dark and the lights aren't that great. And you think, God, I can hardly barely see in front of this car. So how do you kind of cope with that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I suppose you know yourself, whenever you're driving and in real life and you're driving home from work, particularly at this time of year, it's almost harder to see in that 1 hour period between day and night than it is to see at nighttime, you know, in that dusk period. And I found that at Spa, I got in the car to do a single stint in that 1 hour window of low light, and ended up doing a triple stint, because basically that was so particularly hard to see in that part that it really was ultimate concentration. And my lap time consistency was very, very poor, because it was so hard to see. I mean, it's only a sim, but it's so realistic how you know, it was so difficult to see, particularly one corner on one lap, and then you get to it the next lap and it'd be even harder to see. And you could do that over and over until it got pitch black and your eyes eventually adjusted. And I found in the nighttime, it was a phenomenal, those 3 hours I think were the best 3 hours of us for the race, and I'm sure my teammate Ryan would agree. I got into the car and we were 46 seconds behind the class leader, having just had a 15-second penalty for bumping into the back marker. But we had a 46 seconds behind the class leader, and they had their best driver in the car. And I got in and I thought, we're not going to catch these guys until that guy gets out of the car. And in the first hour, we had caught them by 11 seconds, so we brought that down to 35. And then the next hour, we brought it down to 12. And then the third hour, just before, I was kind of disappointed. We caught them, and I got onto 1 second behind them, and sadly, they got a drive-through for track limits, and it was so disappointing because we chased them for about 8 hours, and the fight was gone before it started, so it was a bit disappointing. But our technique, basically, to actually get round to what you asked me rather than me going off on a tangent, my technique really was full concentration, no talk really, and my teammate basically fed me minimal information when I needed it. So the only information I got was the car we were chasing's lap time on the start finish line every lap, and that was it. It was as soon as I crossed start finish line, it gave me the lap time of the car ahead, and every now and again he would give me a wind update into Lacombe and the bus stop, because having a tailwind can influence your braking distance.
Yeah, no, it was pretty exceptional watching it, because I just thought it's not like even if you're driving at night and you've got full beam, so you can see quite far ahead, because obviously you can't do that because you're going to be blinding everybody on the racetrack.
Yeah.
So it was quite exceptional watching how they managed to spot the braking points, and and because these are Spa's got so many challenging corners and high speed corners where you're coming from very high speed to really having hard braking. And I was impressed that, I know people did go off and there were incidents and penalties and other things, but the fact that you kept going and you managed to stay on the track is really quite impressive, because in Formula One you have your night races, but the whole track's lit up. So it's so much easier. Obviously they don't have lights on the cars, but you see that and you think, yes, they might have shadows and other things that could distract them, but overall it's quite straightforward in terms of at least there is lighting, especially when you think of places like Singapore or Bahrain and Abu Dhabi at the end, but it's quite a thing. So along from driving as well, I take it, have you been to quite a lot of races, obviously the pre-COVID era, to watch endurance racing and other types of motorsport?
Yes, so I live in Northern Ireland, so a flyaway race to me is really just going over to England. So I have been to Silverstone, Brands, and Snetterton. Really, mainly it was always for the touring cars. I went to Silverstone for the Formula One once, and then I went to Silverstone last year. Yes, last year. Me and the girlfriend decided last minute, let's go to Silverstone, because we wanted to go see the World Endurance Championship. And I'm so delighted we actually did, because had I not done that, I would have never had the opportunity to see the LMP1s in person ever again, because coronavirus came, sadly, and we had booked Le Mans, and we had booked Le Mans this year to go for our first year to go to Le Mans, and obviously it got moved around and no fans, and so hopefully it will be able to go next year. But endurance racing, to watch it live is something else, particularly the LMP1s. They're just insane,
And they're quite loud as well, aren't they? The LMP1s have a pretty strong sound from them. They are quite loud for a decent racing car.
Yeah, some of them do. The non-hybrid ones. So the Toyotas they're incredible machines to watch. I was fortunate enough to stand at the end of the pit lane at Silverstone, my girlfriend and I, and the Toyota takes off on electric motors only. It's like instant acceleration, and it takes off electric. And the second it gets to the exit line, the engine kicks in. It's immediate. It's almost, you can't blink quick enough. There's an amazing machine to watch, and you had the Ginetta, I can't even remember. It's LT61 something or other, and then you have the Rebellions, and they're just incredible. The noise of them is amazing,
Yeah. I was going to say, because last year we went to a place called Simtrack, which is near Leeds, and they have an actual real racing car that was in an accident, but they've done it all up and made it into a sim, and they've got a big kind of 12-foot screen, and so it's as accurate as it can be. It's the kind of thing that I think you would probably quite like. Because obviously doing all that sim racing and even as a roll cage built in and all the kind of stuff, so it's exactly as you would expect the real car to be. And we did it. Me and one of my co-hosts went down last year and had a shot, and it's a phenomenal experience, because the brake pedal is properly hard, so it's like it would be in real life. The settings are all, you can adjust everything on then they use a set of Corsa and things like that to do all the practice. But that was the first time when I had the go. It was so much like a real racing car, because I've done in years past, you arrive and drive kind of motor racing day back at it was done. But these kind of things are exceptional, and with the big screen in front of you, it looked so real. It was unbelievable, and you were sweating away at the end of it. It was a real. You thought you'd done a workout, and then you were told, right, you've only 15 minutes. It was amazing. But they've got James Kellett, who was the teammate to Lando Norris in the Ginetta Cup when they were in the teammates, and he of course beat Lando Norris, so he's one of the main instructors there. So it was quite a thing. But I'm sure when things, you always get that on a live show. Somebody tell the mother-in-law never to phone, and they always phone. But Oh, can you see it there? Oh, what's happened? Oh,
Are we okay?
Yep, I think that is because the mother-in-law phoned or something like that. So I'll blame it on the mother-in-law. But no, it's amazing how the technology is just coming together, and then you can really learn how to go so much faster. And how do you find? Because obviously, do you have to train quite a lot? Do you like to keep yourself quite fit so that you're kind of mentally able to do these kind of races?
I mean, before lockdown, I wasn't too bad on fitness, but lockdown hit and I couldn't keep my hand out of my mouth. So I was that hungry. No, I mean, endurance racing, I'm used to watching 24-hour races and I'll watch 24 hours. So keeping involved and actually active, because you're racing as opposed to, staring at a screen as such. It's not hard for me. I don't find it hard. I mean, when we did Spa, I pushed harder in the last hour than I did for the entire race because we were chasing another car. And the way I like to see of it is, when you have such a big task in front of you like that, take little bite-sized chunks or mini goals to set for yourself. And so, for example, target a certain lap time, or if you have a car ahead, try and, you think, well, I'm not going to catch him, but I'm going to target to bring the gap down by this much. Things like that, and little mental challenges and trying to work out strategy and stuff. It keeps your mind active. So you might be tired, and believe me, I was tired. You might be tired. You don't realize it. It's. I wouldn't necessarily say adrenaline, but it almost feels like adrenaline. It just kind of, you're pent up, and you don't notice you're tired until you actually stop.
Aye. No, it's quite a thing, and I have to say, I was amazed at so many drivers doing extra stints and all of this, and I thought, God, that is something else, and that was me before I was about to go to sleep, to get a wee break, and then but I got up about 5:30 and watched all of it all and caught up with all the highlights, and it was incredible because by this time it was getting light again, the way that they had set the whole game up. But no, it's a fantastic thing. I have to say, I've never been to Le Mans. I've always wanted to see what it's like, and I've tended to watch it on TV and things like that. And it does look. There's something about the character and the emotion of Le Mans. It must be amazing to kind of witness it in real life, But and it's like any Grand Prix. I've been to the European Grand Prix at Donington way back in 1993.
That's the year Senna did his amazing first lap, wasn't it?
Oh, well, we were amazed. I was there. It was my 18th birthday. And I was there with a friend of mine and their father, and we were just at the back kind of chicane at the kind of Donington loop at the back. And we saw Schumacher go off into the gravel right in front of us. And then we saw the noise was incredible because when they came on their warm-up lap, it was like, it was so loud, you're covering your ears. But it was an amazing noise. The Ferraris had this kind of V12 singing sound of that only the Italians can do. And then when you knew the red light was on, because all of it, they'd got onto the grid that was kind of behind the stadium where we were, and then you could hear the revs go up, and then when the lights went off, the revs just dropped, and then all the traction control kind of came in, and it was like watching a fly because we kind of saw them go around the back of the circuit, and all the people were taking their photographs because it was really foggy and quite a kind of dark start to the race. It was really poor conditions. And then, of course, we heard that Senna had been blocked at the first corner and he was down to 7th. And then bit by bit, he was climbing up. And then when he came to the chicane, I think he had overtaken Hill. So he was in 2nd place and he was right behind Prost. And then he went down out of view. And then when he came up into view, he was in the lead. And then that was it. And it was just sensational. And we had a funny moment because we were Damon Hill fans. So we had our little Union Jack flags that we bought, and we were like this, kind of waving our Union Jack flags, and then there were a whole bunch of Brazilians behind us on the mount, kind of there. And of course, when they realized that Senna was in the lead, they all did this huge kind of Mexican wave behind us. And then they saw our 2 Union Jack wet, damp flags kind of like that, and that was it behind us, But
I'm sure that was a phenomenal memory. Like that's something. I mean, if I was there, that's something I would hold forever. Imagine you were there the day Senna did that phenomenal lap at Donington that everyone still talks about. So I'm sure you're delighted to have been there.
Oh, it was amazing. It was the most incredible experience, and when you have the helicopters flying before the start, they've all got the flags on, and it's putting the hairs up on your back. It's like you realize you're witnessing something that is incredible. You're one of the fortunate few that can actually get to the circuit and see this thing actually take place, you know. And I think it's like that for every motor racing event that's kind of done well. I mean, I went to the Blancpain Championship at Silverstone last year, and that was an amazing event. I saw David Perel. I'd interviewed him earlier, and he said, "Oh, if you're coming down, you get a chance to come to the race, come and see me." And so I saw him in the pit lane, and that when he was doing his signatures and autographs, but we managed to get onto the grid. And so we walked onto the grid, and although it wasn't as busy, obviously, as in like a main like Grand Prix or anything, but it was still fantastic and exciting to walk up and down, you know, through the cars. I always went up at the sides. I didn't get in anybody's way. But just to see the whole thing, and as they stand next to the cars, and then they eventually get ready to get in, and it's an amazing experience. How do you find, you know, when you're approaching a big race like that, do you get a little bit nervous, or are you kind of full of adrenaline and ready to go?
I am totally pumped and excited until about 5 minutes before the start, and all my confidence just goes like that and surrounds us. And I started the car at Suzuka, and it was quite nervous. But doing Spa was a whole different cup of tea. I think what happened to Spa was there was 2 starts. There was a massive crash at the start, and they had to do a restart. And so that first one, I was super nervous. It's kind of the gravity of the situation, and it's more so you have 40 cars around you who all want to do the exact same thing as you and gain positions. So when they really did the restart, I wasn't quite as nervous because it was kind of out of my system at that point.
It brings it down a bit, doesn't it? It kind of takes the pressure slightly as it eases.
I think what you're saying there, Hugh, what you were saying about, you know, being amazed by the start procedure of races, that's one thing I miss about endurance racing is the standing start. Only when I'm trackside. On TV, I love a rolling start, but when you're trackside and you're not on the grid and you're somewhere else on the track, no matter what series it's for, and there's a standing start, and the whole circuit is quiet until you just hear engines hitting the rev limiter, and it's one of the most. It's just all the hairs stand up on your arms.
It is brilliant, isn't it? It's
amazing.
One of the best things we used to do. We used to go to Jerez in Spain and watch the Formula One testing, because you could get in. I think it was like at one point it was like €7 to get in. This was back in like 2010 or 2008. And we did it for about 3 or 4 years on the trot. And that time it was like Lewis Hamilton, and they had the V8 cars and things. And it was phenomenal, because they would, if you paid a little bit more, you could get all the way around the circuit. So we used to go there, and I remember doing it in 2008. And the first car that came round onto the back straight at Jerez was Lewis Hamilton in his McLaren. And so we had a little camera, and we were taking this thing, and I've got it on my catalogue of videos on my channel. This was him racing down, and immediately, you know, you could hear the car, but it was just exciting to watch, you know. And then of course they do more. But one of the best things I enjoyed was that towards the end of the practice day, or the testing day, they would all do practice starts.
Yes.
So we managed to get opposite the pit lane, and then they would all come up, and it was just like they were going to start a race, because they would all they'd be spinning the wheels and bouncing the car off the rev limiter, and then they would form on the grid, and sometimes you had about 3 or 4 of them actually stopping on the grid lines, and then they would all go pretty much at the same time to race away and practice, and it was just the best thing that you could ever hear, you know. But have you ever seen things like that at things like Goodwood Festival of Speed? Do you sometimes try to?
That's another bucket list thing. So the 2 main things for me is Le Mans #1 and then Goodwood #2. And as I say, we were supposed to go to Le Mans this year, and it's gotten that we weren't able to go. It's obviously it's very understandable, you know, with the pandemic going on. Hopefully it will return next year. But as #1 for me is Le Mans. It's just Le Mans above all. I've wanted to go to Le Mans since I was following motorsport, to be honest with you. The first thing anyone follows is Formula One, and then the second thing they hear about is probably the 24 Hours of Le Mans. For me, it was like that. So Goodwood's the next thing for me, I want to say, because anytime Goodwood's on, and I actually think the Goodwood YouTube channel is running all live streams constantly. You know, and it's phenomenal. Even like, you know, I wouldn't be a huge, massive fan of supercar road cars. I do like them, but, you know, whenever somebody comes out with a new car and, you know, it's a boutique manufacturer and it does the Nürburgring time or something, it doesn't interest me as much as a race car does. But whenever they do Goodwood and you have the supercar shit, I love it. I think it's the best thing you can watch. It's fantastic.
Aye. Oh, they're fantastic. I remember 2 years ago we went and we actually thought it was the Formula One cars because they were so loud, but it was the Ferrari FXX. It was the LaFerrari, and then also the Ferrari FXX from a few years back. And they
that thing's a screamer.
Oh, it's the sound of heaven. It's a kind of, it's just this incredible sound as it takes off. And we thought it was the F1 Ferraris, to be fair, because of the old days, because of the noise. And then we just saw this thing whiz past, and it was an FXX, which is one of my all-time favorite cars and things. But Goodwood is phenomenal. If you get the chance to go, it's an incredible experience.
I'd love to, absolutely love to. I think some of those cars at the minute that are coming out, though, I mean, the track day specials, you've the FXX, and then you've the Aston Vulcan. That's another one I absolutely love. The Vulcan. I think that's as cool as get out. If I had all the money in the world, I think, well, that's an Aston Vulcan. And to see that one guy who has a road legal Vulcan, that's just so cool.
That's the thing you can't really do when you've got 20-mile-an-hour limits out in every blooming town and city up and down the country now. But they're spectacular machinery, isn't it? And I suppose that's the great thing about sim racing is that you get a chance to drive cars that are maybe based on these amazing machines. And obviously they're a lot louder. Obviously, when I went to the Block Paint Championship, I was quite impressed at how loud the cars were. Things like the Audi R8s. They were really surprisingly loud, and the Lamborghinis and all these other cars. They had the Ferraris. It was brilliant fun being able to see them all and just the close competition. And it was a thing. But you never know. Perhaps you'll get in if you can keep going up these grids, and there'll be more money thrown at the sim racing. You might do one of these crossovers and become the next. Yeah, no, that would be the thing. So what
have you ever? Sorry, Hugh, have you ever actually been to like an ACO race, like WEC or ELMS or anything like that?
I've not seen a World Endurance Championship race. The nearest thing I've seen is Block Paint, which lasted about 3 hours at Silverstone. But I would love to see the big Le Mans cars, the proper endurance cars.
I think the number one race car, if you ever get the chance to hear live in person at the moment, is a 911 RSR, the Porsche GTE. I'm sure you've heard videos of it. It's an absolute screamer. It's the loudest car, I think, race car currently in the world. It has to be beyond the shout, and it's just bursts your eardrums. It's incredible, but the sound is it's just so evocative of old race cars. If you get a chance to go to a WEC or ELMS race where there's a GTE RSR running, and thankfully they're all running to the current spec now with the exhausts out the back, and it's just insane. When we were at Silverstone, we were standing. I'm sure you've been to Silverstone. Have you been to Silverstone?
Yep.
You know where Magus and Beckett says, that Apex 1 of Magus is the closest part you can get to the track at Silverstone because everything's so far away. Yeah. And we were standing there, and we were just, can't remember what we were looking at. We were looking down the track towards Stowe. And then just the next thing was just your eardrum got burst by a 911 RSR coming through.
Wow.
It's insane how loud they are.
I always remember the Williams Renaults being pretty. The sound was a harsher sound compared to the Ferraris. The Ferraris you didn't have to put your hands to your ears in the early 90s. But the Williams Renault was a V10, and it was quite a hard sound, but it's still an amazing sound. And then the McLarens and the Honda engine was a great engine. And the V8s, the Ford V8s were rougher. But again, not quite as loud or as kind of singing as the V8s in like the era of 2000s and 2010 onwards and things like that. But I think for me the sound from a racing car is really crucial. That's why I'm not a massive fan of the current F1s. They're okay, and I think they're a wee bit louder, but they're just not the same.
I'm in awe of the technology. I mean, the performance they can do. I was fortunate enough to go to Silverstone in 2017, which was the first year of these current regs, but the last year before the Halo. And I was fortunate enough to go then and to watch a Formula One car going through high aerodynamic corners like Copse and Magus and Vegas. And whatnot. It's just next level. It's insane. The sound is such a big part of the, I don't know whether you probably call it the soul or the emotion of motorsport, but the mathematical or engineering or technological side is, you can always be in awe of that, and even electronic technology like the hybrid LMP1s, but you have to have a good sound car.
That's it. Yeah. But I always remember when I tried to convince my wife when we went to the testing in 2011, and I wasn't sure how she would take it, because she had been convinced to come with me and watch this. And we got nearer and nearer Jerez, and we were about a couple of miles away, and you could hear that all of a sudden you heard this, and I said, and she kind of said, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "Oh, this must have been a bee, dear. Must have been a bee." And it was. I thought very loud bees in Spain, and then it got loud. It got louder and louder, and then I thought, I can't keep this up. But the thing was, she was quite actually motivated by it, because when we got out the car, and we were all literally, you slam the door shut, lock it, and you're running to the entrance of the track, and you pay how many euros to get in, and then you're right at the chicane. So you got very close to the action. So they're coming round, these kind of right-handers, and then they brake really late, and then they go in. And of course, we saw Schumacher in the Mercedes coming around with his famous red helmet, coming into these screens. And it was great to watch how some cars could take it flat, faster than others, and some launched it more than others. So it's what have you learned from anyone in particular with your sim racing? Have you looked at anyone you think, oh yeah, I like the way they drive, or had inspiration to follow kind of particular racing drivers and try and do what they do?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started doing it, I was doing that Alonso technique. Do you remember how Alonso used to drive in his run-up days, where he used to throw, he used to throw the steering wheel in and understeer the car, but because he was doing it, it was so aggressive, the car would grip up. And when I first started doing sim racing, I started driving like that, and it was working for me. But obviously, that doesn't work in endurance racing, because the tires just die after 3 laps. So, but I mean, in terms of real life drivers, that's really what I was doing. But in sim racing, I've learned a lot from watching. There's some fantastic guys on YouTube, and obviously there's some fantastic people who offer amazing coaching services. So as you know, David Perel offers a fantastic coaching service, and Nils Neujoks offers one as well. But these guys as well, this is their business. But on top of that, they offer some fantastic free coaching stuff on YouTube, and things like that are really helpful. Every time I'm doing a new track, I've done every track in ACC now, obviously. But when I first first started, like, we did the Suzuka 10-hour race, and I hadn't driven Suzuka I hadn't driven Suzuka in Forza, but I hadn't sim raced on Suzuka ever until 2 weeks before we did the Suzuka 10-hour race. I'd never driven it on a steering wheel before. But I wouldn't have learned how to do that had I not watched videos on YouTube from. There's a lap guide on there from a guy called Unleashed Drivers. I think it's a crew of guys does that. And things like Nils Neujoks is a fantastic video up where he analyzes some guy, one of his clients' laps at Spa, and he just goes through the minor differences. Like, you think the natural thing to think to go quicker is I need to brake as late as possible, but what he showed was, I mean, he's one of the quickest guys in the game. As he's actually braking 10 meters earlier, but it's meaning he's gaining half a second by the time he gets to Licombe, because he's getting on the throttle a lot earlier, and things like that. There's some phenomenal resources out there to help people get quicker, and that's really it. Really, I've just one of those YouTube DIY guys.
It is amazing though. That's how I started the channel, because I was watching people like Super GT.
Yes, that's another one actually. That's another one I can watch.
And you would watch for hours and hours as live streams, and then the gaming videos that he would produce. And eventually I thought, I would love to interview him and see what it was like, what would be the thing. And I hadn't really seen any other interviews of sim racers. So I thought, right, I'll do it. So I started off as a podcast, and eventually went into video, and then put them out on YouTube. And he said yes. I remember sending him a super chat thing or a message saying, would you ever be up for a podcast interview? And he was one of the first to say yes. And that was when he had, I think, just over 100,000 subscribers, and now he's at about 450,000 or something incredible, But it's amazing how it's all coming together, and how sim racing is just building this big community of fans, and many of them do like motorsport, because I think now they see this as a way to combine both. You can have great fun in your own home playing the games, and then hopefully you can get a deal to get in somewhere, get to Silverstone, get to somewhere, a big event. And then you can watch it for real, and or do another sim race at the event. It's amazing how it's
I think Super GT, he's a phenomenal content creator, and there's unbelievable content creators who are really raising the bar and making raising awareness, should I say, for sim racing. Super GT, he's original and he's funny, as well as people like Jimmy Broadbent and Jardier and such like that. But things like having competed now in a sim endurance event only makes me love the real life thing a lot more than I thought I ever could do, because if I'm finding it tough and I'm sitting behind a computer screen, what are these guys doing when they're getting in cars that are over 50 degrees Celsius and doing it for 3 hours long? And things like that I absolutely love. And endurance racing, I think, I don't know if you listen to a podcast by Graham Goodwin and Marshall Pruitt, it's called This Week in Sports Cars. But one thing Graham Goodwin, who's the editor of Daily Sports Car, said is something along the lines of sports car racing is just a rule book, and it's not about competing. It's just a rule book, and people just have to drive around the rule book as opposed to being a competition. But what's brilliant about endurance racing is all the rules, because all the rules add strategy aspects, and it's so complex. It's almost like playing chess, as opposed to playing football, where it's really the goal is to go up on end and score a goal. But in sim racing, in endurance racing, you have any god's amount of things that could trip you up and give you a penalty and ruin your race. Let alone the fact you're overtaking cars that are 15 seconds laps slower than you, for example. So it's I think now, especially with sims like ACC, which are a fully licensed title, you can become incredibly immersed, especially with ACC, and the complexity and the accuracy of the sound and the trackside details and things like that is beyond immersive. Like, I could never have imagined when I started sim racing being able to actually do it for 3 hours in a row for a triple stint and not get bored. But you're so immersed in the experience of it. And I've only got a Logitech, but even at that, it's just, you're so immersed in it. And one of the other guys who actually drove in the Sim Grid World Cup, Naka, I've got a bit of a banter rivalry going with him, because I did 275 laps of Spa and he did 276, and he beat me by one. But he beat me by 1 lap. And anyway, he did 5 hours in a row at the start of the race, 5 stints. So we did close to 5.5 hours driving at the start of the race. I just cannot comprehend how anyone can do that and not be totally spent afterwards. And that's really where I see it. It is almost like a feat of endurance in itself. You're sitting behind a computer screen, but I mean, you're sitting there physically exerting yourself for 5.5 hours. There's no way around it. There's no easier way of saying it. So.
that is something else, isn't it? I mean, 5 stints, it probably would be illegal in a real race, wouldn't it? They might not allow
you. It is. Yeah. I think most championships is something like you can only do 4 hours in a row at maximum. And this guy did 5, and he did something like another 4 in a row at the end of the race. I really couldn't believe he was doing it. I looked at the stats after the race. I'm an addict for data or data. I'm an addict for it. I always analyze stint pace and all after a big race, and I looked and it said that I had done 46% of the race, and other guy had done 46% of the race. When I counted the laps, he had done 1 more lap than me, and we just had a bit of a banter going about it. I was like, I can't believe it.
That is quite something, because I mean, you've got to be so careful as well, and when you're coming into the pits, for example, that you don't go over the speed limit. So you've got to have your steering wheel all programs. You have the pit limiter on. What do you find is your biggest challenge when you're doing that kind of night driving, or easy mistakes to make? What would you say is pitfalls you can fall into?
I think the pit speed is really actually what you've just mentioned there is the easiest one to trip yourself up on, and we've done it. I think in 3 of our our 3 first endurance races, the three ones we did before we entered the sim grid. We did it in every single one. We got a pit lane speed limiter penalty, and it was it's whether it's heat of the moment or whether it's lapse of concentration or whatever. It's very easy to knock the pit limiter off whenever you're fired up and shaking with adrenaline. And at Spa, if you do that at Spa, a stop go 30 seconds at Spa is over 1.5 minutes of time penalty. So, but particularly it becomes almost a harder race if you're out in front and you have a comfortable margin and you think, right, we are out in front and it's our race to lose. It almost becomes more mentally challenging than it does when you're coming from behind, because if you're coming from 10 positions down or whatever, you just do what racing drivers do, I suppose. You just get the bit between your teeth and drive as quick as you can to get to the front. But when you're at the front, you have to manage a race, and it becomes a whole other dimension, and it becomes quite a lot more mentally stressful, I actually think, because you become more aware of your fragility, should I say, to penalties.
Mm-hmm. I know I remember watching a few people go through with their time penalties at Spa, and I mean it took forever to go all the way down.
Yeah.
And also the exit is lethal because you're coming up really at the side of Eau Rouge, aren't you? That bit, and you think that's the most, you got slow cars and then people going incredibly quickly. That's a formula for destruction if ever there was. I mean, I suppose in Formula One the pit lane comes out much earlier, so at the bottom of the hill, so it's a lot safer. But no, it's you think you could get a penalty and end up going through coming out the pit lane and then have a huge crash at the top, and that could be the end of your race if you go in the wrong place at the wrong time, and also it's how do you avoid that if you're coming up the road? Does it give you any kind of warning that somebody's coming out? Or
so I mean, you get a warning from your engineer, the in-game engineer, but I think what I'd like to add to that is what was really quite terrible for us was, I mentioned before that we had spent the whole race catching the leaders of the championship, who are our championship rivals, and sadly they got a drive-through penalty, and then we later noticed that they were really, really far down the order, and when I figured out what happened to them is exactly what you just mentioned, and they had come over the top of Eau Rouge and Raidillon and come unsighted behind another car, and sadly there was another car in the end of T-boning them at the top of Raidillon, and they ended up with something like 10 minutes of delays, in repairs and pit lane time, and then had a service stop go 30 because of incorrect pit lane procedure as a result, and things like that, and Raidillon is a little bit like I can't think of other corners now, but Raidillon is one of those gems. Eau Rouge and Raidillon is one of those gems which thankfully still exists in the real world, and obviously still exists in sim racing, and naturally it is very dangerous, and we have seen very, very sadly actually in just last year, Anton Hubert, who passed away as a result of a crash there, and Juan Manuel Correa, who lost his legs. But I mean, it's almost, but we're very lucky to have corners like that still exist, and it is almost every race meeting at every type of race series. There's a crash there, real life and sim racing, and LMPs, GTs crash there, and in the sim grid race we actually saw an extraordinary amount of crashes in the first 2 or 3 hours for Mercedes and Audis at that corner, and really I think that's that. I didn't feel like we were really that quick at Spa, but the reason we did so well is because we avoided having issues like that. And, so things like that are all dangers you have to look out for, particularly that pit exit, which does effectively just, throw cars onto the track, while it's the quickest part of the track. So it's a big risk.
No, it's some tracks are just insane. As to how dangerous they can be, but then they make that's the character of the circuit, and if you took that away, this would never be the same. Having them going, it was like after the horrendous accident of Ayrton Senna at Tamburello, and I mean Imola was an amazing circuit, but you kind of feel though that in some ways with the chicanes as they raced there a couple of weeks back, it wasn't the same. I mean the Tamburello corner was an incredible, exceptional corner, and there had been big accidents before. I remember Gerhard Berger had a huge crash at Tamburello in his Ferrari, and it went on fire, but he jumped out. I think he was okay. But it's in some ways you think they could make it safer, but keep the original track, and because they didn't want to take the trees down, and that's why they had to have that wall there. And of course that's what proved to be the fatal kind of thing that happened way back in '94. But no, these circuits, you hope that they'll preserve them, and I mean at least in Formula One. Thankfully, it seems to be that they have some pretty good design, so they keep things fairly reasonable.
I think I think with Imola as well. I think had such an accident happened today, it wouldn't have been fatal for Ayrton, because the Formula One safety technology of today is really amazing to look at. I mean, they have these phenomenal barriers now. I don't know if you remember in 2011, Perez had that crash in Monaco when he went sideways. And if he had that crash 20 years ago, well, it would have been a very terrible thing. But I think if say Imola had survived in its form with Tamburello as the big sweeper, to today, it wouldn't be quite as dangerous if someone crashed, because we would have those modern barriers, and we would have that modern runoff as such. So obviously the nature of the circuit has changed, but it was a necessary thing in those days, you suppose. And even Spa, I believe that year they changed Spa to have a chicane in the middle of Eau Rouge.
Yeah, some kind of thing to slow it all down, and they did it in Canada. They had these ridiculous chicanes after the hairpins and things like that. It was, basically almost bolt on a few cones here and there, and that was about it, But
the thing is, modern safety changes have been really good. I mean, they've been phenomenal. Sadly, some tracks it does change the character, but like things for Le Mans, for example, the Porsche curves have had the walls moved back and back and back over the years, and even just not last year, last year, even last year, there was a Corvette had a crash in Porsche curves, and it was just a phenomenal crash. Like, as safe as the circuit is, he managed to hit the one piece of barrier that wasn't a Tech Pro safety barrier, and the car just disintegrated and went everywhere. And if race cars weren't as safe as they were, sadly we might not be talking about them. So I think safety is a phenomenal thing. I am actually a big advocate for safe motor racing, so long as as you've mentioned, it's very important to keep the character of the circuit. I believe Spa is actually making some safety changes in the coming years, because they're wanting to attract motorcycle racing. So they're putting gravel traps in, but I don't think they're changing any corners, thankfully.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, isn't it? The evolvement and the kind of how the tracks kind of evolve over the years and how it all goes. But we've got some great tracks. I have to say, I'm looking forward to Turkey this weekend. I think that's going to be quite a good race, and that incredible Turn 8 is going to be quite fun. But it's amazing how things like Gran Turismo have made their own versions. All these amazing tracks that aren't, that they've made up, that are kind of but almost as challenging. And it all works so that you've got the sim racing almost competing and intervening with the real kind of racing and things like that. But it's fantastic. Oh, would you believe we've been going for over an hour, which is fantastic. Wow. But it's been absolutely amazing interviewing you today, James. It's absolutely fantastic seeing about your career and how well you've done in such a short period of time. And I was going to say that obviously you said you had your steering wheel was on a stand. Do you have plans to maybe get a proper sim rig like you've seen some of your rivals use? Do you think that will be your next step?
I think down the line that would be ideal, but at the moment we're not long living in the house that we're living in at the moment, so we're still doing decorating phase. But the current room I'm in at the moment is my music production studio, and at the moment I have to. I mean, it's kind of like sharing a house with two people. The sim racing and the music production have to kind of fight for space, really. And so at the moment, I have the sim racing gears actually just packed off to my left here to get out of the way. But basically, normally, at the moment it's on a stand. I move it into the way when I want to race, and move it out of the way and put my music gear back when I make music, for example. But maybe in the future I'll get a rig. If I want a stronger wheel, I'll need a rig. But the stand I have at the moment is it's quite good, to be honest with you. It's quite accommodating, and I'm 6'7", and it's quite hard for me to get the. I can't imagine me being able to fit into a race car in real life, but thankfully for this stand, I am fortunate enough to get the pedals pushed to the absolute furthest away they go from me, and it's just about comfortable, so I'm quite happy with that.
That's pretty good going, isn't it? And it also shows that you can actually race extremely well on fairly, entry-level machinery, which is great. So you can imagine that once you get a sim rig and a bit more, you'll be even faster, because I think it does. I think the more you feel like you're in the real thing, well, the more it kind of probably envelops you to go even more and to find those extra fractions for qualifying and consistency and everything else. But no, that's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight. We've had some great questions, and we've had lots of funny comments from my co-hosts who are trying to amuse themselves as I've been ignoring their questions so far and their comments. But no, they've all been very good. But they've been talking about the tracks and all the things that we've been doing. But there is one good question here. It says, who would scare you the most on track, Grosjean, Magnussen, or Albon?
Oh, Grosjean, hands down. Magnussen's funny, you know. If you had a crash with Magnussen, you'd just swear at him and he'd swear back at you. If you have a crash with Grosjean, you know, he wouldn't shut up about it for 6 months, you know. I actually think Albon's a really good driver. He's just been really unlucky. Do you not think so? I think he's been really, really unlucky. I think the Haas guys, they're good drivers, but they're the Haas drivers, so they just seem to be lacking something.
They've been there a long time, and I think maybe it's probably quite a good idea to get fresh run of drivers in and see how it goes. But one of my co-hosts, Jonathan, who's been writing comments there, he did a race day, what was that, a race week at Silverstone to get his racing license, and that's why we call him the real racing driver. Even though I can beat him on Gran Turismo, which he can't stand, but I'll never stop repeating that. But he actually did a race, a 4-day course, and then you had to do 2 races to get your license at the end of the week. And there were 2 groups of 12 people, and in the other group was Kevin Magnussen and his father. Yeah, be back in 2007.
Jan doesn't mince his words.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were brilliant. And so we were, they used to, whenever they were racing, we were not, so we were kind of watching. But it was fantastic. So we've got this great picture on the podium with Jonathan and all the drivers that were in the main group. And Kevin Magnussen's in the background on the podium with us.
Wow.
But we never thought that we would be seeing him just a few years later, only about 7 or 8 years later, entering Formula One.
Kevin Magnussen's actually, I think he's quite an exciting driver. I've always really quite liked Kevin Magnussen. He's got a personality to them. You know, he doesn't fit that. You know, sometimes racing drivers get into that media personality kind of mode all the time.
So
Magnussen has a bit of a personality about him. I really quite like. I see him with his dad. His dad's the same. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
I remember his father used to smoke. And I remember Jackie Stewart, who was not pleased with him because when he drove for the Stewart, Jackie was saying, he smokes and he drinks and all this stuff, and he's not very good for being a racing driver and all this kind of stuff.
Who was it won the Grand Prix for Stewart? But I can't remember who it was. Was it? It wasn't Herbert, was it? Was it Johnny Herbert?
Oh, yes, I think
it was the Nürburgring, wasn't it, when Stewart won the Grand Prix? I can't remember. This is before I was old enough to.
That'll be. My co-host Andrew Marr will probably know. He'll be searching Google as we speak. But yes, I think it was. I think it. Who was in the Stewart racing? It wasn't Irvine.
I think it was Johnny Herbert. I think, but I might be wrong. I could easily be wrong.
Because he won a couple of races for Benetton, didn't he?
I think he got his debut at Silverstone. He got his first win at Silverstone, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that would have been maybe Herbert. If not, my co-host will tell me, I hope. It was quite funny how I always remember Jackie Stewart's reaction, because they did years ago. I think it was with Clive James for the start of the Grand Prix, and it was in Australia. They had all the drivers at that time sitting in the studio, and then Jackie Stewart was with them, and then so Clive James asked him, "So are you happy with your 2 drivers?" And I'm sure Jackie Stewart said, "Yes, if one of them would stop smoking, I'd be happy." So that's the thing. Yes, it was definitely Johnny Herbert.
There we go. Okay, what a guess, because this was before I was probably old enough to even. I didn't even count 2 and 2. So.
No, that's fantastic. Well, look, thank you very, very much for being on the show tonight. It's been really, really good, and I wish you all the best for your future in sim racing. And keep in touch with us. We'd love to have you back on the show. You're always welcome. And we hope to have some sim racing. We're actually hoping to do a league as well on Gran Turismo and things like that, or between Gran Turismo or ACC. So it'd be great if ever you wanted to take part, have a go in a race with us and show us how it's done. Then you'd be very, very welcome. But I'll close the show, but stay on the line just now. But to everyone who's been watching tonight, thank you very much for your questions. It's been a brilliant show. I'm sure you've all enjoyed it. If it's the first time that you've been on the show or watching our channel, please subscribe and give us a like. That would be absolutely fantastic. But as always, our end of the show motto is drive fast and try not to crash. Bye just now.